Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, Cool Wake Magic gameplay. This time around we are on the map Excavation Site, playing as the Dark Elves against the Lizardmen. So this time around I did decide to go with a very elite army, though unlike in, for example, my recent High Elf replay, I didn't decide to go Dragon Heavy. Instead, I would decide to just focus on a very elite core of infantry and some limited cavalry to try to beat the Lizardmen. One of the Lizardmen's biggest weaknesses is actually their infantry. Because of their strong mid-tier infantry, because of Source Warriors, people often think that the Lizards actually have pretty good infantry, but especially Temple Guard is somewhat lackluster top-tier infantry. So you can easily beat them in the infantry game, and with some fire support you can potentially deal with the big monsters too. So here I did decide to bring Marathi. She's my only hero, and my lord, well, my lord obviously, my only character. And basically, standard kit. I did bring Soul Stealer for heal, as well as applying some pressure to the enemy troops. Power of Darkness, of course, to get extra winds of magic. And Melkoth Mystify Miasma. Soul Blight, because I think this is a pretty decent debuff, depending on what I'm trying to focus. Even if I'm relying on 90% armor-piercing troops here, a lot of the Lizardmen infantry does rely on non-AP damage in melee, so this can be pretty powerful. And then, of course, I do have Heartrender as well as Enchanting Beauty, so a combination of these debuffs can drop enemy melee attack by a substantial margin and also debuff their melee defense. For my front line, it is 3 units of Blackguard of Nagron. Obviously, this is pretty expensive, but these guys do have monstrous melee defense. They've got great armor of 100, armor piercing, of course, anti-large. They will destroy basically anything the Lizardmen can put on the field, including Temple Guard, and of course they'll manhandle their monsters in a straight-up fight. Obviously, with cycle charging and whatnot, this can definitely be a little tougher, but for that we do have some other solutions. In the second line, I do have 2 units of Hargoneth Executioners. These guys are not nearly as tanky as the Blackguard, but they do hit like trucks against infantry, and these guys are really just there to help me tear through the Source Warriors a little faster. One of the things people don't realize, I think, is that a lot of Halberd units, despite seemingly comparable stats, actually don't attack as fast. Hargoneth Executioners, I do believe, attacks quite a bit faster than Blackguard and Nagron, and that's the case for most sword or dual-wielding or two-handed infantry compared to most polearms. So these guys will definitely kind of help me tear through those skin cohorts or the Source Warriors very, very quickly. On my second line, I do have 2 units of Shades with Greatswords. These guys are veteran up a bit. Obviously, some monstrous range damage. They don't have the best ammo capacity, and it's important to keep in mind that the main reason their damage is so high is because they fire faster than regular Dark Shards. They don't actually do more damage on their projectiles. They do have a tiny bit more range, but really the main thing here is that they fire pretty quickly, so you can potentially get some extra volleys off before your opponent has really had enough time to plow through your front line and get on top of your shades. They also do have great swords because I figured it could help tear through enemy infantry. They can help destroy them at close quarters, and if push comes to shove, they can do okay against monsters in their midst and all that sort of stuff. Potentially dual wielding or even normal shades could have been decent enough, but I didn't want to try out the great swords. Finally, in the backline, we do have the single unit of Cold One Knights. These guys are mostly there to provide me with mass and some additional anti-large armor piercing damage. For their price, Cold One Knights are actually really good. I think the biggest problem is, of course, that rampage. So basically, they're a one-shot wonder. You point them at a target, they go in, they start rampaging, but hopefully they bring the target down or cause immense damage. You can see my opponent here trying to use his 2 solar engines to snipe away at my Hargoneth Executioners and my Blackguard. My opponent definitely has a pretty strong skirmishing contingent, 2 Chameleon Skinks. This would definitely be a weakness of this army, is if your opponent brings a lot of Chameleon Skinks, so definitely was a little bit of a gamble here, just bring 2 Shades and Marathi to shut him down. But my opponent did bring 2 Chameleon Skinks. He does have 2 Bastillodon solar engines, which, despite the fact that they lack AP and don't have the best of accuracy or anything like that, these guys can definitely lay down the hurt on units like Hargoneth Executioners, Blackguard. They're probably the best solution Lizards have to those sorts of units. For his front line, my opponent is definitely going a little squishy. He has a lot of skin cohorts, which are basically going to be useless against my army. It's really anchored on these 2 Source Warriors shields, but they are really not going to stand up for very long against my elite core of infantry. For his second line, or for his supporting troops, my opponent does have Lord Mazdamundi, of course, a very strong caster. He's pretty tanky as well. He does have okay missile resistance here, especially with the Sunburst Standard of Hexoatl. That's also providing +9 melee defense. He does provide, of course, the usual buffs for being a lord. But most importantly, he is a very strong caster, and he does have Curse of the Midnight Wind here. Accidentally right-click there. He does have Harmonic Convergence, Apotheosis. Actually, I do believe my opponent brought... Oh, he didn't bring everything. He does have Arcane Forging. Shield of the Old Ones, which is a 44% magic resist. Banishment, which is a bound spell, and Ruination of Cities, another bound spell. So potentially there's a lot of bound spell damage going down here, and against my fairly blobbed up troops, that could be a problem. Over here you can see I have hit these skinks with a Melkoth Mystify Miasma, dropping them by 24% speed. I do believe their vanilla speed is like 54, 40. Oh, never mind, just 48. Still, they're very quick, especially with the poison. And for the second line, my opponent does have a Sarskar veteran here. Obviously, Sarskar veteran is pretty powerful. Not as strong as say Krokgar, but he doesn't rampage. They actually took away Primal Instincts, so he doesn't rampage at all. So despite the somewhat mediocre stats, he's very potent against large units, and had I brought a dragon or something like that, he would be in a much better position. Unfortunately, here against Blackguard and Marathi, you can just fly away. It's not the strongest position. Finally, my opponent does have a Skink Chief up in the air. Nothing fancy to say there. It's an extra charge of Cold-Blooded and some annoying pressure he can apply to Marathi. Over here, you can see my Dark Shards unloading on these Chameleon Skinks, doing quite a bit of work. It's one of the things I suggest, even if you're dealing with Chameleon Skinks, people often look at that 40% missile resist and figure, oh, I shouldn't even bother. But it's definitely worthwhile. Chameleon Skinks don't have much armor, so if you can just overwhelm that resist, you'll be okay. Now over here, my opponent makes a little bit of a miscalculation, pushes his Chameleon Skinks a little too close. Not sure if he expected me not to engage with the Cold One Knights, but the Cold One Knights are now on top of him, and they are going to slaughter his Chameleons in melee. They have very good armor, so the Chameleons will struggle pretty mightily against them, and that's going to be really rough. Unfortunately for me, though, definitely struggling. I'm trying to hit these Chameleon Skinks with that Melkoth's Mystify Miasma, whittle them down, force them back, and buy my troops some time here, allow my infantry to close. You can see my opponent is trying to basically just kite me. He's falling back with his lizards, trying to flank here with the Skink cohorts, and just trying to kind of pincer me. And obviously, I'm just pushing my infantry straight down the pipe, trying to get on top of these Sarge warriors and the Skinks and those troops. Over here, Marathi does break the charge of the Skink cohort a little bit. I just push the Shades in, and you can see the Skinks don't have very good melee stats. Obviously, with Marathi in there, they're down to 2 melee attack, which is atrocious. And the Shades with great swords have monsters melee attack, 42 melee attack. With a bonus for infantry of 12. So basically the Shades have basically reached the max chance to hit against the Skinks, or pretty close to it. The Skinks have almost no chance of hitting the Shades, and the Shades are going to tear them to shreds. In the meantime, my other unit of Shades is applying some pressure to Mazdamundi, who is pushing into my Hargoneth Executioners, and the Hargoneth Executioners will do a fine job against all of these troops. Obviously, you can see with those debuffs coming down, Curse of the Midnight Wind and whatnot, we're definitely in for a rough time. Meantime, Blackguard pushing in. Over here, you can see the Skinks have routed. They simply never stood a chance, and you can see the Shades basically shrugged it off with minimal damage done. And Lord Mazdamundi here definitely taking a beating. The front line fight is definitely not looking bad for me. You can see the Blackguard just locking down these Sarge warriors, locking down these Skinks, holding their own. While of course the Hargoneth Executioners here are going to take a pounding from Mazdamundi. They're not going to take too much from the Sarge warriors. They're not going to take too much from the Skink cohort. And you can see in Soul Stealer going down to heal up Marathi. You can see she's already almost topped off. While here in the back line, the Shades keep firing away. These Shades are going to pressure the Skinks off for a little bit. And here in the pits, the Blackguard is nigh unbreakable. Honestly, these guys are amazing in the way they just don't break. And you can see they're going to start dragging the Scar Veteran down into the muck. My opponent does cast a Banishment here, but it kind of wanders off being a Vortex spell, and he obviously didn't want it plowing through his own troops, so it was a bit of a cautious cast. In the meantime, though, Lord Mazdamundi using Apotheosis on him. Not sure why he overcast it. I think a lot of people just assume overcasts are a better improvement in the effects, but that's not the case. Definitely always be aware of what your of what the effect is. Over here you can see the Shades with great swords do have to struggle a little bit more against these Skinks. They were already damaged a bit from the previous shooting, but the Skinks did rake in a few kills there against the Shades, because I wasn't ready for them, I wasn't paying enough attention. But of course with the Cold One I jump in, it's not going to be too much of a problem. In the meantime, the Skink Chief is pressuring Marathi. You can see Soul Blight has gone down, debuffing these guys' damage output. You can see it drops them by 9 damage, so definitely not bad. And in the meantime, my Shades are whittling down my opponent's troops, and you can see that at this point my opponent does decide to GG out. So definitely a little bit of a quick game. We're going to throw a second one in here, but good game to my opponent Nerd Herd. But I definitely think if you're this is a decent. I definitely think that this is a pretty decent build if you're going in as Dark Elves. One of the only caveats or problems I think is that if your opponent brings a lot more Chameleon Skinks, you might opponent only about 2, but if your opponent brings more Chameleon Skink pressure, you're definitely in for a world of hurt. 2 Shades is not enough to zone it away. Cold One Knights are not a reliable counter because they're rather slow. The Chameleon Skinks will be slowing them down to 51, while these guys only have 66 speed to begin with. That drops down to 51 when poisoned. So definitely that's not a reliable counter. So I think that if potentially it might be better to bring Dark Shards. You can almost bring a 2-to-1 ratio of Dark Shards. So you could easily cram 3 Dark Shards in, or maybe 4 if you want to bring Unshielded ones. You could fit 4 in for these Shades, and Unshielded might be a decent choice here. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. If you're a little more on top of defending your backline and need to counter Skinks, Chameleon Skinks, I definitely think vanilla Dark Shards might be the better way to go. Nonetheless, great game to my opponent. As far as composition goes, I think Skinks aren't a very good pick against Dark Elves personally. Definitely not 4 of them. Obviously, they're very cheap, and they widen your line, but they just can't trade with anything the Dark Elves put on the field. Bleak Swords, Red Spears, they'll all trash it. The Dark Elves have our Blackheart Corsairs and Witch Elves, which are really built to annihilate these sorts of units. Much less these sorts of troops like Blackguard and Harkonneth Executioners and that sort of stuff. So I definitely think that if you're going in with, I think Skinks are definitely a bit of an iffy pick. The normal sort of melee oriented Skinks definitely, without the javelins and any of that sort of stuff. So I think trying to bring a little more potentially backline pressure or something like that might be a good idea. And obviously you do want to use your spells as best you can to just nuke down this sort of infantry, because obviously Blackguard is unbreakable, or not unbreakable, but isn't affected by psychology, so you need some sort of tools, magical probably, to nuke them down. So definitely trying to blob troops up, get them more compacted for Bastillodon shots, and that sort of stuff is very important. Nonetheless, I'm going to be jumping over to a second replay, and we'll see how things go there. So here we are, guys, on Dakraz, playing with the Dwarves against the Tomb Kings in what should be a pretty fun matchup. Once again, another bit of an experimental build. Rather than going for some crazy elite thing here, though, we're going for a very heavy firing line. And personally, I'm not sure this is the best way to go. I think that it's a bit iffy if your opponent goes very heavy on infantry, but against Tomb Kings, they often bring large constructs, and so this sort of build I figured could do okay. For my forces that I've decided to bring here, I did bring Grumbrindle, the White Dwarf. He does have Grumbrindle Knows No Fear, as well as Flash Bomb, which I think are really the only necessary items you want to bring on him. Flash Bomb is just so good for that slow and that melee defense debuff. Alongside him, 2 Thanes with Tormentor Sword, and the front line is composed of 3 Longbeards, as well as the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. And I think the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass are a good choice, despite their somewhat weaker armor and lack of immunity psychology. These guys do have the benefit of a bonus versus infantry and fire damage, which is surprisingly decent against Tomb Kings, who have quite a few units that are vulnerable to fire. I do think the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass are a decent sort of supplement to Longbeards. On the second line and on the flanks, we do have some miners with blasting charges. Once again, these guys are pretty decent against the squishier Tomb King infantry, and they can just hold their own, and they provide some extra buffer. In the back, we do have the Dragonback Slayers providing some anti-large and, of course, that wonderful slow. And then we have a massive firing contingent. 2 units of Thunders, 2 units of Trollhammer Torpedoes, and it's the Ulthar's Raiders anchoring things. And really the hope here is that I didn't expect this many constructs, but if my opponent brings several constructs, we can scatter, we can split our Iron Drakes out, we can split our Thunders up, and hopefully bait our opponent into a position where he's not able to shut everything down, and we slowly but surely chip away at everything. For my opponent, though, he did catch me off guard here with an immensely construct-heavy build. For his front line, he does have a whole bunch of Skeleton Warriors. I don't think there are 2 Tomb Guard on the flanks, interestingly enough. Probably expecting the Ushapti to do the main work in the center. He does have 2 units of Ushapti, a Tomb Scorpion, Camarine War Sphinx, and a Higher Titan, so no magic. For his Lord, he does have his Tomb King, just the vanilla variant, mounted also on a War Sphinx. He does have a Tomb Strike, he does have Scorpion Armor, My Will Be Done, which is a nice little melee attack buff, and of course he does have his built-in Curse, which is very potent. And Fear and Terror, while not the greatest thing against Dwarves usually, it can definitely affect their backline, which for most part, unless your opponents bring Bugman's Rangers, your backline is susceptible to Fear and Terror. Even Iron Drakes, and I do believe actually Iron Breakers are both susceptible to Psychology. So regardless, we are pushing in. Obviously, I don't have any artillery. My opponent doesn't have almost any shooting. His only shooting is that lone Camarine War Sphinx. So we are simply pushing in to engage. Now, almost immediately, you can see I'm pivoting all of my troops to one flank. You can see all my shooting, because I realized that my opponent had brought an immensely heavy monster contingent, so I really needed to sort of find a method to deal with them one at a time. And you can see over here a nice shot with the what is it called? Shem's Burning Gaze from the Higher Titan, peppering away at my Thunders. Definitely a bit of a decent usage there. You're knocking off about 6 models immediately. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start focusing on this flank. What I'm doing over on the other flank is trying to isolate it, trying to block off these Scorpions, trying to block off these Camarine War Sphinx, prevent them from pushing into my backline, and try to take my opponent apart one flank at a time. My opponent hasn't brought Archon, so he doesn't have that heal. He didn't bring a Necrotect, so my opponent just doesn't have those heals, and so I figured if I can focus down one flank at a time, I'll be in a good spot. And obviously I'm not too concerned about the Higher Titan because it's very slow, and even the Dwarves can kind of help block it up. Over here you can see the Camarine War Sphinx is taking a beating. It's hit by a Tormentor Sword, and you can see it is just getting focused hard. All these shots marked by Ulthar does go down on it. It's dropping like a brick. It's down to very little HP. You can see all the way down to 3,000. And my opponent is trying to get into my backline, but the Dragonback Slayers have dove in here. They're blocking. My miners are plowing in. On the flanks, those Shopti are getting a little blocked up by the Dragonfire Pass Warriors. Longbeards are going to tie down these skeletons. And on the flanks, I'm not entirely sure what the exact trade-off is between Longbeards and Tomb Guard. I assume it's a pretty tight fight. The two units, Yeah, Tomb Guard does have worse melee stats, but they do have higher weapon strength, whereas the Longbeards have much higher armor, and but they have less HP because there's more Tomb Guard. So I'm not entirely sure who wins in that fight, but either way, it's pretty close. Over here, though, you can see the Khemerian War Sphinx does get marked by Ulthar. It's getting hit by the Thane. It's getting whacked by all that fire from the Troll Hammers, and things are definitely looking rather grim for it. So it's going to get focused down here, down to 1200 HP, and it immediately starts falling apart and disintegrating. So that's one unit almost immediately down. Now over here, my miners are diving in against the Hydra Titan, trying to tie it down, but unfortunately for me, the Trollhammer torpedoes did get hit in the flank by the Tomb King. Definitely a bit of a rough stuff there. I do hit it with the Flash Bomb, but unfortunately, even when hit by Flash Bomb, the Tomb King is able to keep hopping around on the charge, so that's definitely a bit of some rough stuff there. These are Shopti have plowed through the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, and my Dragonback Slayers are still trying to deal with the Tomb Scorpion over here, so definitely some rough stuff. So what I'm trying to do now is desperately trying to pull my troops apart, separate my troops. Fortunately, my Dragonfire Pass or my Dragonback Slayers here got distracted, and I'm not using them properly. You can see in the front line things are kind of stabilizing. I do believe the Longbeards might actually win out against the Tomb Guard in the long run. The Warriors of Dragonfire Pass beating down the Skeleton Warriors over here, or actually those are just Longbeards. Warriors of Dragonfire Pass dealing with Skeleton Warriors, Longbeards dealing with Tomb Guards. So things are definitely pretty tight right now. Definitely very close. You can see the Iron Breakers here getting smashed by the Tomb Scorpion. They're getting flung around. I do pop Grumbrindle has no fear to keep my firing line intact, and you can see those Dwarven Panzerfausts there. Those good old Iron Drake Trollhammer torpedoes were firing some shots into that Tomb King, but now they're just getting tied down in melee. So really, things are definitely rough. Perhaps my formation was a little too tight initially, and I'm being forced to try to separate my troops out. But unfortunately, those Shopti are hot on my heels. But of course, with Grumbrindle in there, he's going to be able to whack those Ushapti pretty hard. Grumbrindle hits like an absolute truck. With the help of these Dragonback Slayers, they'll be able to shred these Ushapti incredibly quickly. And you can see the Thunderers coming back online. These Ushapti are getting snared and dragged back into this fight, and that Thunderers are going to start being able to whittle down this Tomb King. Over here, you can see the Thunderers trying to fight their way clear of the Scorpion, but of course, with its crazy animations, it's able to go wherever the heck it feels like. But these Ushapti are being dragged into the muck. Over on the flanks, of course, one of the units of Tomb Guard has collapsed to the Longbeards. So now, or actually, just the Skeleton Warriors, I guess, got collapsed by the Longbeards. So now these two troops are dealing with the lone Tomb Guard. While on the flanks, unfortunately, the miners still trying to tie down the Tomb King, but you can see once again those Dwarven Panzerfausts peppering down that Nekar and War Sphinx, or Khemerian War Sphinx. And I really do love these guys, their animations, but unfortunately this Hydra Titan is getting tying them down. So I'm really trying to slow it down, trying to deal with it here with the Dragonback Slayers, trying to get these guys clear, because I really can't afford to have them wasted on this Hydra Titan. Over here, though, the miners are distracting the Tomb King. They're buying me some time for these Thunderers to work their way away. They've still got about half their models, and you can see more of those good old Dwarven Trollhammer torpedoes whacking away. The two Shopti here have gotten kind of entangled. I do believe this was a summoned blob. Over here, unfortunately, the Skeleton Warriors are chasing off these Longbeards, who finally did rout after a courageous fight. But things are looking okay, surprisingly. This Hydra Titan is very low on HP. You can see this Tomb King over here getting constantly distracted, having its AI reset by the miners. And over here you can see all of those throwing axes from the Ulthar's Raiders raining in, and now we got those those anti-tank rockets, basically, or those Dwarven Trollhammer torpedoes slamming into this Hydra Titan, those explosions just peppering off, sending sparks and just sending showering bits of armor onto the ground as the Dragonback Slayers do close on this guy. And Dragonback Slayers are just annihilating him. You can see the poor Hydra Titan here just finally just go down, exploding, a burst of whatever that is flying out of his skull. On the flanks, oh, never mind, here's the Ushapti. The Ushapti summon does go down on top of my Thunderers, but it's a little too late. You can see over here the Tomb King getting hit. He does try to plow through my troops here, but he's getting marked by Ulthar, getting peppered in the flank. You can see, just look at those spiky torpedoes just plowing in, and finally send that Tomb King flying. So definitely some cool stuff, knocking that guy to the dust. Over here, the Ushapti are tearing through the Thunderers, but it doesn't matter at this point. It's simply going to be GG, as my opponent's army, except for that summon, has been annihilated. Is this the most competitive build against Tomb Kings? I would not say so. It's definitely a little overkill on the firepower. You don't need this many Iron Drakes and this many Thunders. You probably want a wider front line, because there's a good chance that your opponent will bring more Tomb Guard. Not necessarily a wave of Tomb Guard, but They might bring more Tomb Guard, they might bring more Skeleton Warriors. Tomb Guard trades surprisingly well with Longbeards, and with this sort of build, you don't really have counters to Tomb Guard. So I definitely think that can be a decent investment. But it was definitely a lot of fun. It was definitely entertaining to watch that Cambrian War Sphinx get annihilated in a matter of seconds by the Marked by Ulthar and the volley fire from the Thunders and the Iron Drakes, and just going down like a 9-pin. As for just a general, definitely if I was trying to make this a little more competitive, I'd probably drop a unit of Iron Drakes, try to get 2 more Dwarf Warriors in there, extend the line a bit. Or maybe get some Slayers in there. Try to cram some additional anti-large stopping power in there. Perhaps even dropping one of the units of Thunders. You really just don't need this much stopping power against the monsters, as useful as it might seem, I don't think. Because you never know. If your opponent goes very heavy on infantry, you'll definitely be in a rough spot with this many backline troops. Nonetheless, I had a great bit of fun there. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Great game to my opponent. Great game to my opponents in these 2 games. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about the game or anything like that, be sure to post them down below, and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.